Welcome to Readings in English. Here, we dive into the rich world of the English language through captivating stories designed to help you learn and grow in your understanding of English. English is a powerful bridge connecting people from all walks of life and cultures, opening doors to new ideas and opportunities. Today's story takes us to a quiet village where a dedicated teacher named Marisol faces a unique challenge. She believes in the power of education, especially learning English, to bring positive change to her community. Despite the village's limited resources, Marisol's dream is to teach her students the language skills they need to connect with the world beyond their mountains. Join us on this inspiring journey as Marisol battles through obstacles and resistance, fueled by her unwavering dedication to her students. As you listen, try to immerse yourself in the words and the emotion of the story, and let each phrase bring you closer to mastering English. The early morning sun peeked over the mountains, casting a golden light on the remote village at the edge of the forest. Everything here felt quiet and still, as if untouched by time. Marisol walked the familiar path to the school, her sandals brushing against the dirt road as she mentally prepared for another day with her students. The villagers often spoke of her dedication, her tireless spirit, and how she believed that education could bring change, even here where resources were sparse and opportunities seemed distant. The school itself was a modest building, with walls painted in a soft, peeling blue and small wooden desks arranged in tidy rows. The classroom was filled with the smell of chalk and the earthy scent that wafted in through open windows. On those walls hung drawings that her students had created, colorful pictures of trees, birds, and the mountains that defined their landscape. To Marisol, each image represented hope and dreams that, although fragile, could blossom if given the right chance. The village, secluded as it was, had limited contact with the outside world. The people here spoke their native language and sometimes basic Spanish, but English was a distant concept and exotic skill that felt almost irrelevant. However, Marisol had always believed otherwise. She imagined the doors that could open if her students understood even a few words of English, if they could one day communicate beyond the bounds of their tiny village. As she looked around the quiet room, Marisol felt a pang of worrying. She knew the villagers had mixed feelings about her mission. Some appreciated her efforts. Others felt learning English was a distraction from more practical skills, yet she was determined. She would find a way to make her students see the potential in every lesson, every new word. That determination was tested sooner than she expected. Just a week after her renewed resolve, a group of visitors arrived, bringing supplies and a sense of excitement that spread quickly through the village. Marisol had hoped to speak with them to explain the school's needs and the challenges they faced in educating the young. But when she tried to express herself, the language barrier rose like an unscalable wall. The visitors were kind, smiling as they handed over boxes filled with books, pencils, and some outdated tablets. Yet Marisol felt an ache in her chest as she struggled to explain how much more the school needed and how desperately the children wanted to learn. Her Spanish wasn't enough, and English remained a distant skill she only dreamed of mastering. When the visitors departed, Marisol watched the trail of dust left by their vehicles, feeling a mix of gratitude and frustration. The supplies they left behind were helpful, but they would last only a short while. She had missed her chance to advocate fully for her students and for the future she envisioned for them. In that moment, she made a decision that would shape the months to come. That evening, Marisol sat by candlelight with a single English phrasebook she had found years ago in the village's small library. The pages were worn, the print faded, yet each word felt like a promise. She knew the journey would be difficult, but if she could learn to speak English, maybe she could teach her students too. And maybe one day they would have the words to reach beyond their village, bringing their dreams closer to reality. As she sounded out the first phrases, repeating each syllable slowly, she felt a surge of hope she hadn't known in years. For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of isolation as much as the possibility of connection. Marisol's journey into the English language began humbly. Each night, after the village settled into the quiet of evening, she sat by the dim light of her candle, poring over the worn phrasebook. The words felt strange on her tongue, different from the familiar flow of her own language and the more rhythmic tones of Spanish. English had sounds that felt foreign and difficult, but Marisol was determined. She knew her students, and perhaps the entire village, were counting on her. The first weeks were exhausting. She would trace each letter, silently mouthing the words before daring to speak them aloud. When she felt confident enough, she introduced a few basic words to her class, disguising them as part of a game. "Repeat after me," she said, and the children, intrigued by the novelty, echoed her attempts. "Hello, good morning, how are you?" Their laughter filled the room as they stumbled over the words, but Marisol encouraged them, her own enthusiasm barely contained. Despite the difficulty, the children seemed to embrace the change, adding a new word each day to their expanding vocabulary. Marisol could see their curiosity growing, a spark that she hoped would soon catch fire. However, learning English alone was challenging. With only her old phrasebook and occasional, unreliable access to the internet through a shared mobile hotspot, Marisol found herself limited. Still, every word she mastered, every phrase she taught her students felt like a step closer to her goal. She began to dream of a future where her students could confidently communicate with the world beyond the village. As she continued her nightly studies, she encountered words she couldn't grasp, phrases that left her perplexed. Yet each challenge only fueled her determination. She wanted her students to have a future rich with opportunity, and she believed English was the first step. Each night, as she turned the final page of her phrasebook and extinguished the candle, Marisol felt her resolve growing stronger. Marisol's enthusiasm faced its first true test not long after she had begun introducing English to her students. The village, as small and tight-knit as it was, had its own pace and its own ways. While some parents were excited by the idea of their children learning a new language, others were not as supportive. "Why English?" a father asked her one morning after she dismissed class. "They need skills that will help them survive here, not words they'll never use." The words struck a nerve, and for a moment, Marisol found herself doubting her mission. She had always respected the ways of her village, the traditions that had shaped their lives for generations. And she understood the parents' concerns learning a language so foreign, so removed from their daily lives, seemed like a luxury. Yet, she couldn't shake the conviction that English held a promise, a way to connect her students to something beyond the village's mountains and forests. Her resolve wavered over the next few days. As she stood before her students, the weight of her doubts was palpable. She taught the lessons, guiding the children through simple phrases and words, but her own enthusiasm had dimmed. Could she be wrong? Was she leading these children down a path that would prove useless in the end? One evening, as Marisol walked home from school, a young girl, Marta, ran up to her, clutching a small, hand-drawn book she had created. She held it out to Marisol with a shy smile. "Teacher, I wrote it in English," she exclaimed, pointing to the cover that read in shaky letters, "My book." Marisol's heart swelled with pride as she flipped through the pages where simple phrases and drawings depicted Marta's life in the village. Her home, her family, the river where she played, all labeled in the words Marisol had taught her. In that moment, her doubts faded, replaced by a deep gratitude for this journey they were on together. Marta's book was more than just words. It was a sign that, despite the obstacles, they were making progress. That night, Marisol returned to her phrase book with renewed vigor. She would continue to study, continue to teach, because each child deserved the chance to dream beyond the horizon. The next morning, Marisol arrived at the school with renewed energy. She had planned a lesson on basic greetings, hoping to engage her students and give them a taste of English in a way that felt approachable and fun. The children sat before her, their eyes wide with anticipation, curious about this new direction in their lessons. "Today, we're going to start with something simple," she announced, holding up a large piece of paper with the words "Hello" and "Good morning" written in bold letters. She pointed to each word, pronouncing them slowly and carefully, and the children followed along, their voices hesitant but eager. At first, they stumbled over the sounds. Some of the children giggled, while others furrowed their brows in concentration, determined to say each word correctly. Marisol walked among them, offering gentle corrections, her smile encouraging them to keep trying. Soon, the classroom was filled with the chorus of tiny voices repeating hello and good morning with growing confidence. As the lesson continued, Marisol felt a thrill of excitement. This was only the beginning, but seeing her students grasp these simple words, seeing their faces light up with each small success, reminded her of why she had begun this journey. For them, English was not just a language. It was a bridge to something new, a path to opportunities they had never dreamed of. By the end of the lesson, the children were greeting each other with an enthusiasm that spread through the room. Marisol watched them, her heart swelling with pride. She knew the journey ahead would be challenging, but at that moment, as her students practiced their new words, she felt a surge of hope. This was the first step, and together they would keep moving forward. In the days that followed, Marisol's small victories were tempered by the realization of just how limited her resources were. She had a few phrase books, some makeshift flashcards, and whatever she could scribble on the blackboard. The materials she needed to make the lessons engaging and effective simply weren't there, and each night she lay awake, wondering how to make the most of what little she had. Determined not to let the lack of resources halt her progress, Marisol began finding creative ways to bring English into the classroom. She used her own drawings to illustrate vocabulary, crafting simple images for words like sun, tree, and river. She made a game out of matching the English words with their translations, encouraging the children to connect what they saw with what they could say. Some parents noticed the change in their children's routine. Curious about the new words their children were bringing home, they began to ask Marisol about the lessons, and a few even expressed cautious interest. This small acknowledgement spurred Marisol on, giving her the encouragement she needed to keep pushing through the obstacles. However, the reality of her limited supplies still weighed on her. She longed for books, more flashcards, anything that could enhance her students' learning experience. One evening, she gathered her courage and approached the village council, hoping they might support her vision by allocating a small portion of the village's limited funds to buy educational materials. The council members listened patiently, some nodding in understanding, while others looked skeptical. Marisol explained the potential she saw in teaching the children English, how it could open doors and bring new opportunities, even for a village as remote as theirs. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. One elder finally spoke, his tone cautious but kind. "Marisol, we understand your dream, but these are difficult times. Our resources are stretched thin as it is." Marisol nodded, understanding, but feeling a pang of disappointment. She thanked them for their time and left, her heart heavy. Returning home, she resolved to continue no matter how daunting the path ahead seemed. She would use every bit of her creativity, every spare moment, to keep her students moving forward. Her dream for them was worth any sacrifice, and she believed, deep down, that somehow they would find a way. A few weeks after her conversation with the village council, Marisol decided to organize a small English presentation with her students. She knew it wouldn't be a grand affair, just a modest demonstration of the words and phrases they had learned. However, she hoped it would show the parents and villagers that their children were genuinely absorbing the lessons, perhaps even spark a bit of pride and curiosity about what they were learning. The children were excited, practicing their greetings and basic phrases over and over, rehearsing for their small but significant moment. Marisol crafted simple phrases for each child to say, "My name is," and "This is my family," accompanied by drawings they had made of their homes and loved ones. The walls of the school buzzed with their excitement, and Marisol could sense a shift in the atmosphere. For the first time, her students felt a sense of pride in their new language. On the day of the presentation, a handful of parents gathered around the modest classroom, some sitting on small stools, others standing by the doorway, their faces a mix of curiosity and quiet skepticism. Marisol welcomed them warmly, thanking them for coming. She began the presentation by explaining what the children had been learning and how hard they had worked. Then, one by one, her students stood before the modest crowd, sharing their simple English phrases with a mix of shyness and excitement. As each child spoke, Marisol could see a glimmer of understanding in the eyes of some of the parents. Small smiles crept onto a few faces, and soft chuckles could be heard when a particularly brave student tried a more difficult phrase. By the end, the atmosphere was one of quiet pride. The villagers clapped, and Marisol felt a surge of satisfaction. They had achieved something, even if it was small. For the first time, Marisol felt that her dream was not hers alone, it was becoming a shared journey. As the parents thanked her quietly on their way out, she could sense a newfound respect in their words. This small victory gave her the courage to press on, knowing that the seeds she had planted were beginning to take root. Encouraged by the response to the presentation, Marisol began reaching out to parents more frequently, sharing updates on the children's progress and explaining the long-term benefits of learning English. Bit by bit, some parents grew more supportive, allowing their children extra time to study and even showing interest in learning a few phrases themselves. For Marisol, this shift in attitude felt like a significant step forward, one that she hadn't expected so soon. However, not everyone was convinced. Some parents remained skeptical, reluctant to embrace what they saw as a foreign influence in their children's education. Marisol understood their concerns. The village had always been self-sufficient, relying on traditions passed down through generations. She didn't want to disrupt that sense of identity, but she hoped to enrich it by giving her students a broader perspective on the world. One evening, a group of parents invited Marisol to join them for a conversation. She could sense their unease, but welcomed the chance to discuss their concerns openly. Over mugs of steaming tea, they expressed their worries that learning English might take the children away from their roots, that it might lead them to value things beyond the village instead of cherishing what they had. Marisol listened patiently, acknowledging their concerns, while explaining that her intention was never to replace the children's culture or values. Rather, she hoped that by learning English, they could gain tools that would benefit the village itself, creating opportunities that could bring resources and knowledge to their community. English, she said, is not just a language. It's a way for the world to know about our village, about who we are. By the end of the evening, some parents seemed more receptive, nodding thoughtfully as they absorbed her words. Others remained hesitant, but Marisol felt a glimmer of hope. Slowly but surely, she was building trust, not only with her students, but with their families. This support, though fragile, was essential for the journey ahead. As she walked home under the vast night sky, Marisol reflected on how far they had come. The children were learning, the parents were beginning to understand, and she felt closer to her goal than ever before. Despite the challenges, she knew she was no longer alone in this mission. Together, they were creating something new, something that might one day change the course of the village. It had been months since Marisol last saw the group of foreign visitors, and she had all but assumed they wouldn't return. However, one bright afternoon, she noticed a cloud of dust rising from the road leading to the village, and soon the familiar sound of vehicles approached. The visitors had returned, bringing a flurry of excitement and anticipation among the villagers, especially Marisol's students, who had grown more confident in their English skills since the last visit. Marisol gathered the children and encouraged them to use the greetings and phrases they had practiced. When the visitors arrived, her students greeted them with a chorus of hello and good afternoon, simple phrases that still surprised and delighted the newcomers. The visitors exchanged glances of pleasant surprise as the children introduced themselves, showcasing their progress in a language that once felt unreachable. One visitor, a tall woman with a gentle smile, approached Marisol and commended her for the children's improvement. The woman, named Sarah, explained that she and her team were part of an organization dedicated to supporting rural education. "We were impressed by your dedication last time," she said, "and we wanted to see how things had progressed." Marisol felt a swell of pride as she shared the story of their journey, explaining the challenges they had faced and the creative methods she had used to teach the children. As she spoke, she realized how far they had come, not only in language skills, but in building confidence and opening their minds to new possibilities. After hearing Marisol's story, Sarah's expression softened, and she spoke in a thoughtful tone. "We want to help," she said. "I can see the impact English is having on your community, and we'd like to support you further." The visitors offered to send more books, educational materials, and even a few tablets to enhance the children's learning experience. Marisol's heart raced with excitement, grateful for the support she had hoped for since that first visit. The children cheered when they heard the news, their eyes shining with hope. For the first time, Marisol felt that the dream she had held so close to her heart was now shared by others. As the visitors left, promising to return soon with supplies, Marisol knew that her small school was on the brink of something remarkable. In the days that followed, Marisol's mind raced with ideas on how to integrate the new materials into her lessons. She began planning ways to use the tablets to connect her students with educational resources beyond the village, envisioning how the books and supplies would deepen their understanding of English. However, as she mapped out her vision, she was reminded that the road ahead wouldn't be without obstacles. Shortly after the visitors left, Marisol learned that she would need to organize a system to store and maintain the new resources, as well as train the children to use the technology responsibly. The village had limited access to electricity, and the tablets would require careful handling and charging schedules. It became clear that the dream of expanding the school's resources came with its own set of challenges. Some villagers also voiced concerns about the increased focus on English and the new materials. One of the elders, a respected figure in the village, approached Marisol with reservations. "We appreciate your efforts, Marisol, but don't forget that our children also need practical skills to survive here," he said, his tone both gentle and firm. "They need to know our land, our ways. Don't let them forget where they come from." Marisol understood the elder's concern. She assured him that her goal was not to replace their culture, but to complement it, to equip the children with skills that could benefit the village while preserving their heritage. She promised to balance English lessons with teachings about the village's traditions, respecting the values that had sustained them for generations. Yet, as Marisol worked through these logistical and cultural challenges, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She began to wonder if she had taken on too much, questioning whether she could truly bridge the worlds of tradition and progress. At times, the strain was overwhelming, and she questioned whether her dream was worth the strain on her and the community. But when she looked into the eyes of her students, their enthusiasm and curiosity renewed her resolve. She could see that they were growing not just in language, but in confidence and vision. Marisol knew she would continue finding ways to balance the old and the new for the sake of these children and the future they represented. The road ahead was uncertain, but she would take it one step at a time. In the days following the visitor's offer of new resources, Marisol realized she needed more support from the community to make this vision sustainable. The supplies and tablets would soon arrive, and she needed help organizing, storing, and integrating them into the children's learning. Deciding to involve the villagers, Marisol called a community meeting at the school one evening, hoping to gain their trust and understanding. The parents and elders gathered slowly, some out of curiosity, others with skepticism still evident in their expressions. As Marisol stood before them, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves. This wasn't just about the children anymore, it was about the village as a whole. She took a deep breath and began to speak, sharing her dream for the school, her hope that learning English could bring new opportunities without diminishing their traditions and identity. She spoke of the visitors' promise, explaining that these new resources were not only for learning English, but also to connect with the world, opening possibilities that could one day support the village's needs. Imagine a future where our children and speak of our village, our traditions, and our values in a way the world can understand, she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. Her words seemed to resonate with some, while others voiced concerns. One father raised his hand, his tone questioning, but not unkind. How do we know this won't lead our children away? What if they forget who they are? Marisol assured him that her teaching would always honor their roots. She promised that alongside English, she would teach the children to cherish their heritage, reminding them of the importance of family, community, and tradition. "We are not replacing anything," she said. "We are adding to what already makes us strong." By the end of the meeting, a few parents had come forward offering their help to create a small storage area for the supplies and to share the responsibility of maintaining the tablets. Marisol felt a glimmer of hope. Even if not everyone was convinced, some were willing to support her. It was a small but significant step forward, showing her that the dream was starting to take root within the community itself. As the days passed, Marisol noticed a change in one of the parents, who had previously been reluctant about the English lessons. Marta's father, Don Felipe, had been among the skeptics, often dismissing Marisol's ideas as impractical. However, after witnessing the children's enthusiasm and seeing Marta's own excitement at learning English, he began to reconsider his stance. One afternoon, as Marisol was preparing lesson plans, Don Felipe appeared at the school's door. His expression was hesitant, but there was a hint of something softer, perhaps even respectful, in his eyes. "Senorita Marisol," he began, clearing his throat. "I've seen how my daughter lights up when she talks about your lessons. It's clear you've inspired her and the other children, and I would like to help. If you'll have me." Marisol was taken aback but grateful. She welcomed his offer, knowing that having a respected figure like Don Felipe on her side would help bridge the gap with other skeptical parents. Over the following weeks, he became her strongest ally, helping to construct a small cabinet to store the tablets and assisting with organizing supplies as they arrived. His presence alone seemed to reassure the other parents, subtly shifting the village's attitude toward the English lessons. Don Felipe also began to ask Marisol questions about English himself. He admitted he was curious, wanting to understand a bit of what his daughter was learning. Marisol gladly taught him a few simple phrases, and the two often shared conversations after school, discussing how English could benefit the village without compromising their traditions. This new alliance with Don Felipe gave Marisol renewed confidence. She could see the impact of her work extending beyond the classroom, beginning to touch the lives of parents and other community members. Her vision was no longer an isolated hope. It was becoming a shared effort, one that promised to unite the village in ways she hadn't anticipated. Walking home one evening after a long day of lessons and preparations, Marisol felt the weight of gratitude and responsibility settle over her. She was no longer alone in her mission. The community was slowly becoming part of it, weaving their trust into her work. Together, they were crafting a future that honored both tradition and progress, a future that was beginning to feel within reach. With the support of Don Felipe and several other parents, Marisol felt emboldened to take another step. She decided to organize a school event where the children could demonstrate their progress in English. She envisioned this event as a way for the villagers to see firsthand what their children were learning and to build further support for the program. The students would each prepare a small presentation introducing themselves and sharing something meaningful in English, a favorite game, a family story, or a dream for the future. As the event approached, the classroom hummed with activity. Marisol and her students rehearsed every afternoon, practicing phrases and refining their presentations. Some of the children were nervous, worried about speaking in front of their families and the entire village. Marisol assured them, guiding each child with patience, encouraging them to embrace their own voices. She watched as shy smiles turned to expressions of confidence, and she felt immense pride in their progress. The parents, too, were drawn into the preparations. Some helped decorate the classroom, while others brought small contribution snacks, chairs, and even a banner to welcome the villagers to the event. Marisol was moved by the growing sense of community, seeing the families come together to support their children. For the first time, the school felt like a true center of the village, a place where everyone's hopes and efforts intersected. On the evening before the event, Marisol stayed late in the classroom, arranging the final touches. She felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. This presentation was more than just an event. It was a symbol of everything they had worked for. She hoped it would show the villagers that English was not just a foreign concept, but a tool that could help them connect with the world. The day of the presentation dawned clear and bright, with a sense of anticipation in the air. The villagers arrived in small groups, gathering outside the classroom as the children, dressed in their best clothes, lined up for their turn to speak. Marisol welcomed everyone warmly, feeling her heart race as she prepared to introduce the event. As she stepped forward, she took a deep breath, reminding herself of the purpose behind this day. Today, our children will share with you what they have learned, she began, her voice steady and clear. They have worked hard, and they are ready to show you the words and phrases they now know in English. I hope you will see, as I do, the promise that learning brings to our village. One by one, the children stepped forward, each taking their place at the front of the room. Some were shy, speaking softly, while others projected their voices with newfound confidence. A young boy named Daniel introduced his family, carefully pronouncing each word as he pointed to a drawing he had made. Marta, holding a small handmade book, shared her dreams of one day writing stories that could be read by children all over the world. As each child presented, Marisol could see a mixture of pride and wonder on the faces of the parents. The room filled with smiles and quiet murmurs as the villagers recognized their children's accomplishments. Even those who had been hesitant or doubtful watched with a hint of amazement, seeing their sons and daughters confidently speak words in a language that had once seemed distant and irrelevant. The event concluded with a round of applause, and Marisol felt a surge of relief and joy as the parents embraced their children, praising their efforts. Several villagers approached Marisol, thanking her and expressing their newfound appreciation for the work she had done. The success of the presentation marked a turning point, not only for her students, but for the entire village. She could see that the dream she had nurtured was now blossoming, its root spreading into the hearts of the community. That evening, as Marisol walked home through the quiet village streets, she reflected on how much they had achieved together. The presentation had shown her that their journey was no longer just about learning a language, it was about creating a legacy of hope and resilience. The path ahead was still uncertain, but Marisol felt stronger than ever, ready to guide her students and community toward a future filled with possibility. The days following the presentation were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Parents, who had once been hesitant, now approached Marisol with encouraging words, expressing their pride in their children's achievements. Some even began to ask if there would be more opportunities for their children to continue learning English. Marisol's heart swelled with joy at seeing how the village had come together, their outlook shifting to embrace the future possibilities she had always dreamed of. A week later, Marisol received an unexpected message from Sarah, the visitor who had previously promised to help with supplies. Sarah wanted to meet and discuss further plans, mentioning that her organization was interested in supporting the village's educational needs on a larger scale. Marisol could hardly believe her ears. Was it possible that the support they had been given was only the beginning? When Sarah arrived, she greeted Marisol warmly and listened attentively as Marisol described the success of the presentation and the enthusiasm it had sparked within the village. Sarah smiled, clearly moved by the story. "Marisol," she began, "your dedication and the progress your students have made are truly inspiring. We believe that with more structured support, your school could serve as a model for other villages." She went on to explain that her organization was considering funding a long-term English program for the school, which could include not only materials, but also training for Marisol and other community members interested in assisting with the teaching. Marisol felt her breath catch at the prospect. It was everything she had hoped for, a chance to expand the program and provide even more resources for her students. But with the excitement came a sense of responsibility. Marisol knew that this expansion would require a careful balance, ensuring that the children continued to learn English while staying connected to their cultural roots. She promised Sarah that she would do everything in her power to make the program a success, blending new knowledge with their existing traditions. After Sarah left, Marisol felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. She knew this was the opportunity of a lifetime, but she also understood the challenges that lay ahead. For the first time, she would be taking on a formal role in shaping the curriculum and managing resources that could change the future of the village. She was ready to step up to this new challenge, confident in the support of her students, their parents, and her growing alliance with the community. As news of the expanded English program spread through the village, reactions were mixed. While many parents were excited and hopeful, some began to worry about what this new focus on English might mean for their children's connection to their heritage. A few elders approached Marisol, expressing their concerns that the children might grow distant from their cultural values and traditions as they pursued education in a foreign language. Marisol listened thoughtfully, understanding the importance of their concerns. She had always been mindful of the balance between progress and preservation, and she didn't want her work to create divisions within the community. After all, her dream had always been to empower the children without compromising the rich heritage that defined the village. In response, Marisol devised a plan to integrate the children's cultural knowledge with their English studies. She began to design lessons that encouraged students to talk about their families, customs, and local traditions in English. She introduced vocabulary related to village life, inviting the children to describe their homes, favorite foods, and even the local plants and animals. She wanted them to see English not as a replacement for their language, but as a way to share their unique experiences with the world. During one of these lessons, Marisol asked each child to bring an item from home that represented something important to them. They shared stories about these items in English, explaining their significance. One child brought a woven basket made by his grandmother. Another shared a small statue that had been in the family for generations. As they spoke, Marisol saw the pride in their eyes, realizing that these lessons were bridging to worlds, one of tradition and one of possibility. Over time, some of the initial concerns began to ease as the community saw that the children were not abandoning their heritage, but learning to express it in new ways. Marisol felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had found a path forward that honored both the old and the new. Her students were becoming fluent not only in a language, but in the art of balancing identities, a skill that would serve them throughout their lives. With the village now more united than ever, Marisol felt prepared to lead them into this new chapter. The journey had been challenging, but she knew that they were building something lasting, a legacy of knowledge, resilience, and respect for both tradition and change. Together, they were not just learning a language, they were creating a future that was both rooted and boundless. The expansion of the English program brought unexpected challenges, testing Marisol's relationship with some of the villagers who had initially supported her efforts. With the additional materials and structured curriculum from Sarah's organization, the program became more demanding, requiring the children to spend extra time studying. Some parents began to worry that the program's intensity to distract their children from their responsibilities at home and in the fields. One afternoon, Marisol was approached by one of her closest allies, Don Felipe, who had supported her from the beginning. His expression was troubled as he explained that a few families were concerned about the balance between schoolwork and daily life in the village. "We see the benefits, Marisol," he said, "but some parents worrying that the children are losing touch with what is most important here." Marisol felt a pang of anxiety. She respected Don Felipe deeply, and his support had been invaluable. She realized that if she lost his backing, it could jeopardize the entire program. She reassured him that she understood the importance of balance and that she would make adjustments to ensure the children's responsibilities were respected. Over the next few days, Marisol carefully adjusted the curriculum, setting aside time for lessons that integrated practical skills with English learning. She introduced vocabulary related to farming, crafting, and village life, encouraging the children to use English to describe their tasks and daily routines. In doing so, she hoped to show the parents that the program could enrich their children's understanding of both the language and their own heritage. When Marisol shared her revised approach with Don Felipe, he nodded thoughtfully. "I think this could work, Marisol," he said, his voice warm with approval. With his continued support, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. She realized that this experience had deepened her understanding of the delicate balance she needed to maintain within the community, a lesson that would guide her efforts moving forward. In the days that followed, Marisol found herself reflecting on the journey she had undertaken and the weight of responsibility it carried. Late one evening, as she reviewed her lesson plans by candlelight, she felt the familiar surge of doubt creep in. Had she made the right choices for her students and the community? Was she pushing too hard, asking too much of a village that had lived without English for generations? She remembered the skepticism she had faced from some of the elders and the hesitation from parents, and a part of her wondered if they were right. Learning English was not a simple task, and in a place where resources were scarce, perhaps her ambition had overreached. The thought weighed heavily on her, making her question if her dream was worth the strain it placed on the village's traditions and way of life. One evening, as she walked through the village to clear her mind, Marisol encountered Marta's grandmother, a quiet woman who rarely voiced her opinions. The elder woman gestured for Marisol to sit with her outside her home, where the two shared a moment of silence under the stars. Then, in a soft, measured voice, the woman began to speak of the importance of courage and the value of change, even when it came with uncertainties. "Young one," she said, "your path is not easy, but no change worth making ever is. We must be brave enough to plant seeds we may not see grow, trusting that they will one day bear fruit." Her words resonated deeply with Marisol, rekindling her resolve and reminding her of why she had started this journey. With a renewed sense of purpose, Marisol returned to her work, determined to continue balancing tradition and progress. She understood now that the fears she held were not only her own, they were shared by the community. But she also knew that with time, patience, and resilience, they could all grow together. The path ahead might still be filled with challenges, but Marisol was ready to face them, guided by the strength she found in her students, her community, and the dream they were bringing to life together. With the words of Marta's grandmother echoing in her mind, Marisol approached the coming months with renewed vigor. She felt a quiet confidence, an understanding that her journey with the village would have its struggles, but would also offer moments of profound growth. The children's progress continued, and with each passing week, they grew more comfortable with English, integrating it naturally into their everyday conversations and activities. However, as the final stage of the program approached, Marisol encountered a new obstacle. Sarah's organization planned to conduct an assessment to measure the impact of the program and determined similar initiatives could be implemented in other villages. While Marisol welcomed the idea, she knew that this evaluation would add pressure not only for her, but for her students as well. Determined to help her students prepare, Marisol scheduled extra sessions after school, encouraging them to review but they had learned and practiced speaking confidently. Some children felt excited by the challenge, while others were nervous, uncertain about how they would perform. Marisol worked tirelessly with each of them, ensuring that they felt supported and prepared for the assessment. The community sensed the intensity of these final weeks, and some parents came forward to offer their assistance, organizing meals for the children and giving them time off from chores to focus on their studies. Don Felipe even took it upon himself to lead the children in review sessions, reinforcing the vocabulary and phrases Marisol had taught them. On the eve of the assessment, Marisol gathered her students in the classroom for one final encouragement. "Remember, this is not just a test of English," she told them, her voice filled with warmth. "It's a chance for you to show how far you've come and how much you've grown. I am so proud of each and every one of you." That night, as she walked home through the quiet village, Marisol felt the weight of the journey they had shared. Regardless of the outcome, she knew that the bonds they had formed, the trust and respect that now existed between her and the community, were achievements that went beyond any assessment. The day of the assessment arrived, and the classroom buzzed with anticipation. Sarah and a few members of her organization were present, along with several parents who had come to watch and offer moral support. Marisol guided her students with a steady presence, reassuring them and reminding them to do their best. One by one, the children demonstrated their skills, introducing themselves, answering questions, and describing their favorite activities in English. Their voices, once hesitant, now carried a confidence that spoke to their hard work and dedication. Even those who had struggled the most showed remarkable progress, surprising both Marisol and the villagers who had come to watch. After the assessment, Sarah approached Marisol with a look of admiration. "Your work here is nothing short of incredible," she said, smiling. "I can see that this program has not only taught them English, but has given them a sense of pride and identity that is deeply rooted in their community." Marisol felt a swell of pride as she looked at her students, who were now celebrating with their parents and friends. She knew that they had accomplished something truly special, not just by learning a language, but by forging a connection between their heritage and the wider world. They had become ambassadors of their culture, young voices capable of sharing their unique stories beyond the borders of their village. In the following days, Marisol received word that Sarah's organization planned to extend the program to other villages, inspired by the success they had witnessed. They offered Marisol an opportunity to lead these new initiatives, to share her teaching methods and inspire other teachers as she had done here. Though the prospect was exciting, Marisol knew that her heart belonged to her village, where her journey had begun. As she watched her students continue to grow and use their new skills, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This chapter in her life though filled with challenges, had become a story of resilience, community, and shared hope. Marisol knew that whatever the future held, the seeds they had planted would continue to grow, nurtured by the love and pride of a village that had embraced both its roots and its dreams. With a grateful heart, Marisol stepped forward into the new day, ready to guide her students toward a future where tradition and progress could thrive side by side.